This is the video for section 8.4, trig functions, trigonometric functions. If you fold it in towards the letters right here, we will look at all three of what they are. And there's three of them. The first one is sine. But we usually denote it just by the word sin. We still say sine though, even though we refer it to as sin in the written form. And what these are ratios between angles and the sides of a triangle. So the sine is the opposite side to the angle given compared to the hypotenuse of that triangle. Okay, so if you'll open this up, what do I mean? If you were given an angle A, the capital A, and you wanted the sine of that angle, then we're looking at the comparison of these letters. I'm going to call this little side A, the long leg B, and then the hypotenuse C. So to this letter A, the side opposite is this side right here, the one that is not touching that angle. And then the hypotenuse will always be the side across the 90 degrees or the longest leg. If we were looking at the B angle, the side opposite is that A, because that's the one that's not touching that angle. And then the hypotenuse would still be the one that's across that 90 degrees, C. So how would we do this in class? It says find x, round to the nearest hundredths. So you're giving this angle right here, and then we have to determine what information we have. We have the side opposite and the hypotenuse. Because we have the side opposite and the hypotenuse, that's the sine function. So we're going to use sine of that 37 degrees is equal to the opposite. I'm going to call it, it is x, and then the hypotenuse, which is 15. Now we have to solve. I want you to notice that this is just being divided by 15. So multiplying by 15 is going to get rid of that. So we multiply by 15 to both sides. And then your calculator, all we need to put is 15 sine of 37, and that'll give me the value of x. So sine is right here of 37. Sorry, it goes 15 sine of 37. And hit enter. And that is the answer you get. In case you did not get that number, let's write it down first, because that means x is approximately, this is the approximately symbol, because you're going to have to round at 9.03. In case you didn't get that number, it means your mode is off. So if you'll go to mode and go down here, it means that your radians was on. You just move over, hit enter, make sure that that degree symbol is highlighted. And then if you try it again, it's going to give you the correct answer. I'm going to write something on the back over here, so on the back of your foldable. If you don't mind, let's talk about what happens if this was set up a little bit different. Let's just pretend that your answer ended up, your equation got set up this way. The sine of 37 was equal to 15 divided by x. If the x is in the denominator, what we tend to do is cross multiply. Dividing by 1 doesn't change the value, but it'll let us do this. 15 is equal to x times the sine of 37. You don't really need those parentheses on there, but I did them. And we're going to divide by the sine of 37. Sorry, sine of 37. And that cancels out. Now you have 15 divided by the sine of 37 is equal to x. So in your calculator, to get that decimal approximation, you would just hit 15 divided by, then put sine of 37. And then this time, x would be approximately 24.92 as the length that you were looking for. So let's take a look at this again. What we found here, x, was the length of this side. We couldn't use a Pythagorean theorem this time because it didn't give us another length. It only gave you an angle measurement. And that's how we know that we need the trig functions. Using the inverse sign. So the inverse sign is written this way, and this is when you're looking for an angle measure. So this one tells me that I'm using the sign, but let's make sure. If I'm looking for f, this one would be the side opposite, or the side that doesn't touch that angle f. So this is the opposite. And then this one is across that 90 degrees, so this would be the hypotenuse. Opposite over hypotenuse is your sine function. But since you're looking for the angle, we call it inverse sine. And then you're going to have open parentheses of the opposite over hypotenuse. So this one would be 15 out of 25. And that's going to equal the measurement of the angle F. On your calculator, you hit second enter. And you're going to do 15 divided by 25. And that gives you the angle measure of F. So this one would be 36 point, on this one only says to the 10th, so 0.9 degrees is approximately the measure of angle F. Since we keep rounding, that's why I'm writing the approximately symbol. The next one that we're going to see is the one that's called cosine. And that's how we write it, but we only write the notation cos to identify cosine. Make sure that you say cosine and sine, not sin and cos. And what this ratio is, depending on the angle that they give you, is that you're going to have the adjacent this time. And the hypotenuse. And what it means to be adjacent is now that we're talking about the side that touches that angle. So let's take a look. On this one, what we need is, first let's label it the short leg A, the long leg B, and the hypotenuse C. And we know that the hypotenuse is the one that's opposite that 90 degrees. On this one, on the angle A, I want you to notice that that side A is going to touch that angle. And that's what makes it adjacent. So I'm going to put like this so you know that we're talking about adjacent. And then the hypotenuse will always be C. So we have the angle, the cosine of A is the adjacent, which is the A side, over the hypotenuse, which is C. Now for the B angle. I want you to notice that that B side is touching that angle or creates that angle. So why isn't this one the adjacent? Well, this one's called the hypotenuse, so it will only be the hypotenuse. It cannot be the opposite, and it cannot be the adjacent. So you're going to have the adjacent now to J. which is b divided by c, the hypotenuse. All right, so on your homework, it'll look like this. And I won't tell you which trig function you need to use, so we need to figure out which trig function we're using. They give us this angle right here. I know that the 15 has to be the hypotenuse because it's the one opposite that 90 degrees or the longest side. This one's adjacent because it'll actually touch that 37 degrees. And that's how I'm supposed to know that this is the cosine that we're using. The cosine of the 37 degrees that they give us is equal to the ratio of the sides, which is adjacent x divided by the hypotenuse 15. There's no need to cross multiply, but even if you did, just to always be consistent, that would be x is equal to 15 cosine of 37. You can make the notation that this is being multiplied by if it helps you understand better. All right, so we have 15 cosine of 37 is approximately, and this one's to the hundredths place, so this one right here, x is approximately 11.98. Okay, using the inverse cosine, and so your homework and test questions look like this. So you have to be able to identify which trig function we need to use. This one, since it's opposite that 90 degrees, we know that it's the hypotenuse. It's wanting angle F, and this side is touching angle F, so that would be adjacent. So we have the adjacent over the hypotenuse, which means cosine. Since I want an angle measure, it's going to be the inverse cosine. That's going to be the ratio of those sides, adjacent over the hypotenuse, 15 divided by 25, is going to be equal to the measurement of the angle F. So the second cos is going to give you that inverse cosine. And then we just write 15 divided by 25. And that means that 53, and this one's in the tenths place, so 53.1 is approximately degrees, is the measurement of the angle F. Just to remind you, so you could always set it equal to a ratio. Let's pretend that we had cos of 37, the cosine of 37 degrees was equal to, and then they said 15 divided by x. And that's why I mentioned that ratio, that you could divide by 1 and always get the correct answer. But we have 15 is equal to x times the cosine of 37. We're going to divide by the cosine of 37 to both sides. And sorry, sometimes I put parentheses on there and sometimes I don't. But it reads the same. 15 divided by the cosine of 37 degrees is what x equals. So this will give you the length measurement. 15 divided by the cosine of 37 degrees. And we're just pretending here that we got these answers, just so when you see problems like this in your homework, you know how to do them. So that would have been that 18.78 is the approximate value of x. And then the last one, it's called tangent. And on tangent, we call it right tan. Don't call it tan, call it tangent, even though it's just written as tan. And the tangent is the opposite. Sorry, I forgot the T over here. Over the adjacent. So this ratio means that we're looking at the opposite and the adjacent of the angle given. So again, let's label This one would be the hypotenuse. So for A, remember it says opposite over adjacent. The opposite is the side that does not touch that angle. So that would be B in this case. And adjacent is the one that does touch that angle, A. On B, we have that the side opposite is the A, and the side adjacent is the B. All right, so what does it look like on your homework? It looks like this. Let's make sure which trig function we have to use. On this one, this is the side opposite. So why do I call it opposite? See my fingers right here? These are the two sides that create that angle 37. If it's not one of these two sides that create that angle, then it's called the opposite. So the side adjacent is the 15. What some students do is get the hypotenuse confused with the adjacent. The hypotenuse, that is the longest side, that is always opposite that 90, is never going to be called the adjacent. So there will be only one option that will be the adjacent. So it has to create that angle and not be the hypotenuse. So the trig function is the opposite over the adjacent, which is tangent, even though we just write tan, of 37 is equal to the opposite, which is x, and the adjacent, which is 15. Okay, we can multiply by 15 to both sides. 15 tangent of 37 is the value of x, and when you put it in your calculator, 15 tangent of 37 is 11.30 is the approximate value of x. So that means that this length is about 11.3. All right, now when we're looking for angles, this is the angle that we need compared to this angle. So remember, the two sides that make that angle are the hypotenuse and the adjacent. Well, this one's across a 90, so this one's the hypotenuse. That means this one has to be the adjacent. The one that does not create that angle, does not touch that angle, is called the opposite. So we have the opposite over the adjacent, which is tangent. We're looking for an angle measure, that's why we need the inverse. And then the ratio of the sides is 15 divided by 25, since it has to be opposite over the adjacent. That's going to be equal to the measurement of the angle F. In your calculator, you're going to put tangent, the inverse tangent, because we're looking for an angle measurement, 15 divided by 25, which means since that rounds to the 10th place, it would be 31 degrees is the approximate value of the measurement of angle F.